Cruise ship hotel workers of Reddit. What is something you aren't allowed to tell us? Odds are, someone passed on your cruise. Think about all the old folks you see get onto the boat. For a lot of them, this is their retirement home, and cheaper than a lot of other retirement homes. They are literally taking cruises until they pass, and we eventually find them in their cabin. Story 2. Hotel worker. Here, ask for everything you need, it will be provided. Also complain about every problem you see. You won't believe the amount of free stuff complainers get. It's awful. And never forget to tip your bellboy. Story 3. I'm a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all hell is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members having sex, smoking, and drinking. Our beers are $1. No substances or spirits, though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo, yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the Happy Couples game, heard it. It was said last cruise, and the one before that, and the one before that. We are not allowed to duck to passengers. But we do know that all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to pass. No, I do not know where Jack Rose is. They're not real people. Story 4. Ex-hotel employee. Here, if you ever need to cancel a hotel reservation, but it's already past the cancellation deadline, just call and move your reservation up a few days. Wait 5 minutes, call back, now well within the cancellation window, and cancel your stay for free. Story 5. I currently work as a housekeeper, seasonal summer. People leave anything and everything behind. Forget your curling iron? We probably have one. Need a charger? Yep. Toys for your child? You got it. If you ask, while we're in between rooms or cleaning a common area, we'd love to help you out. No one really asks. Story 6. Hotel worker here. Worked evenings and overnights for a few years now. This all doesn't apply to all hotels, but many. A lot of these will depend on how you treat the staff. Chargers are the #1 most forgotten item. We have tons of them. If you are nice and ask where you can buy one, we will offer one. I don't care who you're banging in your room. And no, I don't know where to find escort. Well, I do, but I'm staying out of that. We know what's good to eat. We also know where you will get sick from eating. Sometimes it's both, and I'll warn you. The pizza guy tells me if you stiff him on the tip. If you're an awful person, I'm less inclined to go out of my way to help you. I will not disclose whether you're here or not. But if the wife spotted your truck in the lot, you're still ducked. Use the safe for valuables. Most housekeepers are trustworthy, but are humans that are around your valuables. I can give you a discount. We have a little leeway with the price of your room. If we're not booked, I can knock off some cost. If we have one room left, I can also jack up the price, and my bosses will reward me for it. I have also jacked the price up just because I don't like someone. Had some tweakers come in, every time they asked the price again, I raised it $10. They ended up paying $130 for a $90 room. Food quality varies. Don't expect gourmet meals. We only have a microwave and oven. The eggs are from a box, but are still real eggs. Muffins are like the ones that come in the tubes. Gravy is powdered mix. Everything is Cisco, so it's not bad, but it's not great. Be wary if you see a Smart and Final truck outside. Their quality is crap. I can't always fix a noise complaint. If it's the people directly above you with kids running around, I can get them to stop. If it's some loud sex and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from, you're going to have to wait it out. If you leave change out after leaving for the day, housekeepers assume it's a tip. Don't complain when $0.70 is missing from your room. I will tolerate your crap, but only to a point. You can be rude, but if you get abusive, name-calling, making a scene, etc., that's over the line. Yes, I can kick you out. No, you won't get me fired. Yes, I will call the cops. No, there's nowhere else in town to stay on a Friday night. Yes, I'm still going to charge you for the first night. Cancellation policy, especially if I can't sell the room again. We have everything you may have forgotten. Toothbrush, razors, sewing needles, thread, deodorant, etc. Just ask. If we're booked, I will tell you so. Asking again will not magically make a room open up. We will call you a cab, but you damn well better be ready. The cab drivers have no patience for tourists. They know you're not a long-term business. If you do substances in the room, keep it quiet and don't do anything that requires smoking in the room. We will call the cops and they will arrest you. The cops are our buddies. I'm in a small town and am on first-name basis with them. We are a huge revenue stream for the city. If I call them, they are usually here before I hang up. They will always side with us. A night in a cell for trespassing is not fun. As an aside, they don't bother me at drunk checkpoints, so that's nice. Don't steal from the room. We will bill you for it. It will cost more than you expect. If you damage something, come clean. If it's something the maintenance dude can fix, we'll probably just bill you for supplies in an hour of his time. If you try and hide it, we'll bill you contractor rate. If something was damaged when you get in, Let us know right away in case we missed something from the last guest. Always inspect your room as soon as you check in for this reason. People pass here. About half are old people that die of being old. The other half are people that check in to check out. It's a really ducked up thing to do to the housekeepers. The housekeepers here are kind of superstitious and do not like going into rooms that people have died in. It's kind of weird knowing I'm the last person that someone talked to. I'll add more if I think of anything. Story 7. The staff on most all cruise lines are not trained nearly well enough to handle an abandoned ship situation. It would be chaos if it were to happen on a large vessel. The safety briefing you go to is just theater, and we want to be there even less than you do. Norovirus is way more common on ships than you would think. Security staff on ships are poorly equipped to handle a major security breach like an active shooter situation. The words "bright star" over the PA indicates a medical emergency is happening and is a page for medical staff to respond. The captain earns bonuses for saving fuel. Leaving port early or arriving late means the ship can go slower and conserve fuel, which means more money for the captain. Story 8. Get a free fridge in your room. Say it is a medical need for medication. HIPAA laws mean they can't pressure details out of you. May not work for smaller motel/hotel, but should for most larger hotels. Cruises. Story 9. Yay, I can finally answer this. I work at an upscale resort. Nights average $500 a night. I work in the entertainment department, meaning we help with both the daycare center and with large groups in-house that companies host. I will say that our child daycare is pretty safe. The only sketchy thing I would say is that we will always tell you that your kid had a good time, regardless if they had been crying up until just before you got there. Parents leave their numbers with us to call if the kid wants to go home. But whenever a kid complains that they want to go home, we do everything in our power to make sure that they stay, because dolal. Also, the in-group activities that we do, biking, hiking, etc., are sometimes made up on the spot. Since the entertainment dept decided not to properly train us in all of our offered activities, newer staff, generally the people that only work summers, are told the morning of that they're running a certain activity and given a really vague rundown of how it's supposed to go and told to do their best to make stuff up but make sure it sounds good. Companies pay thousands of dollars for these activities, but I can assure you the thought that goes into these activities is essentially zero. Story 10. I worked for a fancy restaurant in a tourist town that catered to cruise line passengers looking to get away from the ships. Our desserts were frozen and shipped to us from a company named Gourmet Chefs. So when you read the menu description and we say that all of our desserts are prepared by gourmet chefs, we aren't lying. They were just reheated and prepared by a high school kid making $3 an hour. Story 11. Night shift hotel worker here. Been in this field for 8 years now, out in the hotel capital of the world, Las Vegas. Here's a few things I can tell you. It pays to be nice to your check-in person. We deal with a-holes every day who think that paying for a room makes them God King of Hilton or something. Spoiler, it doesn't. But if you're a pleasant person to talk to, hell, I'll bend over backwards to help you. Ask nicely enough, and I might even get you a lower rate. On a related note, stop trying to weasel your way to a cheaper room. You want the A rate? You better have a AOA card. Military rate? Whip out that military ID. If you don't have those things, I'm not going to take your word that you'll get it faxed over in the morning. And for the love of God, don't try to bribe me. I've had people offer me drinks, cash, BJs from like totally hot girl bro, and all kinds of I'll make it up to you, I swear bullcrap. Here's the short answer. No, you're not getting your room for half off. No one gets their room for half off. No one. My job is worth more than 20 bucks and a 6-pack of Bud Light, Broseph. On a related note, as others have said, don't argue with me about the rate. If you say you found it cheaper online, then ducking book it online. We don't price match. Ask before you complain. We know the area. If we recommend a restaurant, it's probably because we can vouch for it. Want to know a good show to see? I've been to a bunch, and I'll set you up with something that won't be a waste of money. Noise complaints will be promptly ignored. Why? Because sound carries from several rooms above you, and most people don't know which room is being loud, even when it's right next to them. Being one room off is the difference between asking someone to keep it down and waking up the rage lady at 3 a.m. I'll go up and listen to see if I can pinpoint the room, but if I can't, then you're just gonna have to deal with it. Vegas. Specific thing. No one cares about your sexual escapades. No one. We've heard and probably seen it all. No one is going to bat an eye when an obvious escort walks through the door and asks for directions to your room. We don't care how much adult film you order. No one is impressed that you had a threesome. Oh, no one. The people who stay with us the most are the biggest of holes. Diamond members, or the equivalent at other brands, are those guests who spend a lot of time at hotels. While we appreciate their business, and I can sympathize for the amount of time you're on the road or in the air, that does not entitle them to anything they please. I've had Diamond members ask me to move guests in other rooms because they were having a conversation at a normal volume. I've had them threaten to see my ass get fired. I even had one woman demand a free night because she hit the emergency button on her room phone. She said that the police officer sent to check on her had disturbed her sleep. Please, for the love of God, find a hotel before you go somewhere. People know Las Vegas as the gambling and showgirls mecca, but there's something else that sells out the entire town on the regular basis: conventions. There are a lot of these throughout the year, and if they're big enough, they can sell out every room from here to Boulder. So please check before you leave, because chances are you're going to be crap out of luck if you have to find somewhere the same day. Story 12. My friend worked on Royal Caribbean on the Explorer of the Seas back in 2006. Said I could book a cruise through him for $15 per night, employee discount. I might have to stay in his cabin with him, but he would see what he could do about getting an unused room for me. Since he departed from Bayonne, and I lived close, I decided to take him up on the offer and do a 4-night trip to Bermuda. The regular room, an interior cabin, panned out, so I had my own room to myself. And I got a pass that allowed me access to employee-only areas. I don't know if I was supposed to be escorted with my friend in all of the non-guest areas, but no one said anything to me when I walked around the ship as long as I had my employee guest badge with access to all of the employees-only doors that my badge allowed. I certainly gave no reason for anyone to be suspicious, so that probably helped. Lots of fun to just go exploring a little bit. The crew areas were relatively clean, reminded me of hospital hallways. I saw 2 crew bars. There was one that was sort of outside, I think on the rear of the ship, and one upstairs with wood paneling. Nothing to be excited about, but was fun to see them nonetheless. That's where I did my cheap drinking. Never saw the jail, but did see the medical office. They had lots of Dramamine on the wall. Help yourself, which I did. The first night I was on the ship was rough. The crew was a blast to hang out with. Lots of really fun people. My friend gave me the lowdown of everyone on the ship one night, who had hooked up with who. As incestuous as it was, everyone seemed pretty cool and willing to keep swapping the bodily fluids. No room for jealousy when you only have so many people to bang. There were definitely cliques. The entertainers hung out with the entertainers, the waiters and waitresses, and hung out with themselves. My friend worked in an area where he got to know everyone, luckily. None of the busboys were likely to have sex with a stage show dancer, is what I picked up from the interaction. Since I was not an employee but not exactly a guest, I was in a gray area and was unusually entertaining to the women I met. Sex would have been like fishing in a barrel. I'm not bragging or anything. Truth is, I really wanted to hang with my friend for the limited time that he was not on duty, not spend my time with random women I won't see again. I don't regret that. Okay, maybe a little bit. One thing I took away was just how absolutely professional the crew at Royal Caribbean were. They loved their jobs, loved making the experience positive for the guests, and took that overall experience very personally. Whatever issues I saw stemmed from human beings just being human. Nothing that would turn me away from traveling Royal Caribbean, quite the contrary. If working on a cruise is something you are mulling, I'd recommend it based on what I saw, at least on Royal Caribbean. It is a truly unique experience that I don't think enough people consider at a time in their lives when they are looking for a rewarding challenge. Till Dyer. Friend worked for RC. I traveled with him at employee cost, got access to employee areas, saw stuff, got a great impression of Royal Caribbean employees, and a positive experience overall. Could have had a lot of sex. Story 13. I've worked at a few independent hotels and a couple tourist town, a few things. So if you forgot something, ask at the front desk. We have toothpaste, brushes, razors, sometimes different kinds of food we've been given as samples that we couldn't find anywhere to display. Ask about places to eat. I know there's a Wendy's across the street, or the center of town has lots of nice-looking restaurants, but one of those is pointless and sad, and the other one is going to gouge you for mediocre food. This can also apply to things to do. So if we recommend a restaurant, we probably either like that place or know our coworkers like it. If we recommend an activity, it's entirely possible we were basically bribed. I would never tell someone to go somewhere I think is awful, but if there's 7 rafting places in town of equal quality, I'm gonna send you to the one that will bring me sandwiches for sending you. We take your crap. Not immediately, but if we can't figure out who you are, or the number doesn't work when we call and you forgot your $300 watch and can't be ducked to try and find it for 3-4 moths, that's my watch. Again though, we are very honest about lost stuff. Most places I've been have some sort of file for lost and found, or at least organize it by month. If you call, we will look and do our best to find your stuff, but people lose so many things that if we kept it all, half the rooms would be full of your bras and flip-flops. It doesn't hurt to ask if there's a better rate. Depending on the property, if you're nice or in a pinch, the front desk has the power to do a lot with your rate. At one property I worked at, if we were almost full and it was past 9 p.m., I could cut $50 off the rate if I felt like it. At most, though I can only really give a 10% discount, but I can do it for almost any reason. That said, don't fight about the rate. No harm in asking, but if you push or get belligerent, I'm not doing crap for you. Also, don't argue with me about the rate being right. Yes, the tax is stupid high. Yes, we're expensive. No, I won't give you the winter rates. Yes, I'm sure that's right. The computer is smarter than both of us. If you go through the internet, Expedia, Hotels.com, and Travelocity are the same thing, and they are holes. Yeah, you'll get a discounted rate, but the fees can sometimes end up making it more expensive. They also severely undercut of hotels because they have the leverage to do so. 2. We can't do anything to your reservation without notification from whatever online service you used. Call them. They send us a fax email. The reservation is changed, canceled. Don't call us though. We need that fax email before we can do anything. Sorry if that makes no sense. You decided to use the service. Story 14. I'm a front desk manager at a hotel. I want to jump in and say something before this gets real big. When this kind of thread pops up, someone always says that the front desk GSA can upgrade or change rates for a guest. If the guest is nice to them, tips them. While this may happen sometimes, it is not common. If one of my employees gave someone a cheapo rate, he has to explain why. It will come up in our reports. That being said, hotels are a ton of fun. I can't think of any big secrets, but I will say this. If you have any questions or requests, no matter how stupid or weird, let the staff know. We love to help people. That's why we went into the industry. And it makes it a lot better for both the guest and the staff when we can help you while you're still in the hotel, and not when you're calling corporate after checkout to complain. Story 15. I have worked in hotels for 8 years, and I'll tell you a lot of the stuff in this thread is untrue. Well, partly. Hotels vary widely in policy and procedures. Some may give you a phone charger if you ask, and others will tell you it's guest's property, which it is, and kindly ask you to duck yourself. I'm currently a housekeeping manager, and we do change the sheets and blankets for every guest. If you're staying more than 3 nights, we will change it during your stay. Hotels are extremely fond of giving out free crap for minute complaints. A hair on your sheets, the room is 2 degrees too warm, you farted, and it left a stain in your underwear no matter how small. If you get angry enough, we will comp you something. Now, having said that, duck you. Duck you in advance and duck you sideways. Hotel employees have to deal with this crap every single day. And we hate you, like from the bottom of my balls. I hate your guts. Sure, you may get something like breakfast for free, but you're ruining multiple people's days so you can get some ducking $15 hash browns for free. Never book through a third party like Priceline, Booking.com, etc. You have absolutely no recourse if anything goes wrong, and we most likely will not compensate you in any way since you will not be receiving a hotel survey. More importantly, Priceline or another third party will duck up your reservation in some way, or give you wrong, misleading information, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, just ask you kindly to call them and talk to them about it. My most important tip, there's a difference between a request and a guarantee for bed types. If you book and request a room with double beds, that just means if we have any left, we'll give you one. I don't know how many pissed off soccer moms come in with 8 kids livid because you have me, he wrong room type, I booked 2 beds. Be kind to your housekeepers. This is not your room, but please treat it like it's yours. It's just disrespectful to trash crap and think, well, they get paid to clean up, right? If you're an elite tier member of a hotel chain, ask nicely for an upgrade. If we say we don't have one, let it go. You have no idea how many elites come in pissed off that there's no suites available. And I'm just sitting there like, dude, there's 100 other people checking in today with your exact same status. You're not that special. If you like big bathrooms, ask for a handicap accessible room with a roll-in shower. Normally about twice the size of a standard bathroom, but without the tub. If you want to check in early, don't just show up, call ahead. We may not have any rooms available. My golden rule is really just be a ducking decent human being. If you're nice to staff and can chat them up for a bit, if they're not swamped, most likely they will hook you up in some way. We meet about 60% of holes, 30% average, and 10% cool people on a daily basis, and we remember who the cool people and the holes are. Story 16. We had a fiend in our crew who was constantly snooping through passengers' pill bottles looking for any sort of substances. Keep your stuff well hidden. Story 17. I work as a longshoreman at a cruise ship terminal. More people die on cruises than you realize, mostly old people. Norovirus is very common, but more during flu season. Crew members go missing, often hitching a free ride to NYC. Rare occasion your luggage will fall in the water being loaded onto the ship. The ship will give you a very crafty refund for your loss of luggage. And if you're going to a berth with more than one ship docked, make sure you know what ship you're going on. Idiots tend to let their luggage get on the wrong ship and have a lovely week without it. Word of advice if you're getting on a cruise ship in New York City, if your ship leaves at 4 home, Get there at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and you will avoid the crowds and the check-in lines, and your luggage will be attended to right away. Story 18, that hotels sometimes overbook rooms, typically more so in the summer since that's a busy season. They are relying on some people either canceling or not showing up. Always a good idea to call and confirm your reservation on the day of arrival, especially if you're going to be late. Story 19, hotelier here. I worked in numerous luxury 5-star properties worldwide. You will be shocked if you know the food quality in buffets. I've seen yellow food coloring added and labeled as saffron sauce, pan-fried sea bass. Haha, it's pan-fried whitefish that comes in generic bags labeled whitefish. People change the expiration date on stuff so that the food cost doesn't increase. The amount of frozen food sold and labeled as fresh is astounding. A la carte food tends to have much better quality. Story 20. Worked for a while on Princess. The cruise line pays for the time that any boat is docked. Therefore, it is good for the bottom line if the ship gets out of port as soon as possible. Ports that are closer to a big city cost more money. That's why we would sometimes dock far away from a major destination, and passengers would have to take a train to the big city. The ship only makes good money while it's out at sea. So I've been on voyages that would spend the late afternoon night at sea instead of in port, in spite of 2 destinations being 30 mins from one another. There are situations I've seen on Atlantic crossing voyages that destination locations are listed that the ship will be visiting, but no one has had good enough weather to get into that port in years. It just makes it look like there will be a destination instead of repeated days at sea. The labor force on different cruise lines tend to be preferred by different ethnicities. There are actually 2 crew bars, one for the officers and one for the rest of the crew. Boils down to being pretty racist with one for English speakers and one for everyone else. As a non-officer, I was literally not allowed to dance with customers on the club dance floor. Drinks and cigarettes are hella cheap for the crew. Patter jokes for most shows are repeated week in, week out. On Princess, there was a 9:1 guy to girl ratio among the crew. Suffice it to say that hella ugly chicks were goddamn prizes. Story 21. Front desk agent here. When you order movies through the television, we know what you watched. So, when you watch all of Backdoor Escort 9, then call the desk and say, "Oh, I didn't know what I chose." We know you are a lying ass who doesn't want that mysterious $15 charge on your bill because the company's paying. Also, I despise people who intentionally go around rooms looking for the slightest thing to complain about. Have even had people go as far as sabotaging rooms to try and get free nights. One of the worst parts about working for a brand that has a 100% satisfaction guarantee. You will come across a lot of adults throwing tantrums like a 5-year-old. Then later they try and be all buddy-buddy with you, and all you can think about is crapting on their pillow. I may have farted on someone's pillow when they were being extremely difficult and rude. Don't know if they got pink eye. Rule of thumb, never treat the staff like crap. They are people too, and for goodness sake, they are taking care of you. Also, don't bash on maids. For example, I get, "Why do your maids speak Spanish so much?" Well, it's pretty ducking simple. It's their native language. Doesn't make them less of a person, and they are the hardest working people in the hotel and get the least amount of money. Plus, they have access to your crap daily, and there aren't cameras in rooms, so be nice. Story 22. Ex-hotel loss prevention agent. Security guard. Tip. Before you head over to the expensive-ass gift shop, if you need a phone charger or anything like that, call front desk and ask if you can borrow one from Lost and Found. We had hundreds of iPhone chargers in those square milk crates. Sorry. If you're going to drink at the bar, know your limits. I once got a call from a bartender saying he needed a wheelchair because a guest was so drunk he couldn't stand. He wanted me to wheel this douche to his room. WTF, dude. So I take the wheelchair up. Drunk dude's lesser drunk buddy helps him in, and I wheel him to front desk to figure out what room this clown is staying in. As I'm talking to the front desk receptionist, this banana weed attempts to stand up and face plants into the marble front desk counter, ducking blood everywhere. I lost my patience and had the operator phone the emergency line for an ambulance and a patrol unit just in case. I gave him an ice pack and kept the area clear until help arrived. That crap was gnarly. I also put the bartender in his place for not cutting that dude off 4 shots ago. Greedy was pushing for tips. That's one story. I've also had countless drunk broads grab my crotch in the elevator while doing key assists. I regret not going through with a handful. I was paranoid I'd get caught. Also domestic violence, lots of it. Story 23. A number of people who work hotels tell you that after a while they take your stuff. I have a great story about this. I used to work in a hotel that got lots and lots of government business. Every 6 months or so, the lost and found bin would get tipped out for an hour or so, and we'd be told to take what we wanted and goodwill the rest. Got a few shirts that way. One year, I found in the bin some binders and a bunch of papers in a tube and a little electronic thing with some cards attached to it. The electric device was a temporary key generator, the kind of thing that is used to secure World of Warcraft accounts these days. In those days, however, they were cutting-edge security, and the cards attached to it had words like Nuclear Regulatory Agency and laptop checkout policy written on it. I was a computer nerd, so I recognized the security device and made the managers give me it, and all the documents. The things in the tube were blueprints or schematics for something I didn't look at too closely. I Googled a few government agencies and sent out a few emails asking if they wanted it back, and went to bed. The next morning, I got 3 replies. Summed up, they were, yes, yes please, and can we send an agent over to pick it up? No idea what the stuff was, probably noting too serious, but they got that agent over to me PDQ once I woke up and gave them my address. Story 24. Hotel worker here also. When you bring your children to our hotel for sporting events, baseball tourneys, etc., we really hate you more than them because you get drunk and ignore them while they tear our hotel apart. Story 25. Generally speaking, hotel guests who book through Expedia and other websites are expendable if we gotta walk someone. Also, you are booking the crappy rooms at the highest price if you do it last minute. Do it long in advance and you are still booking crappy inventory. Groups and corporate travelers always get better treatment because they come back and represent a lot more login term revenue than you. People that book online are like people that switch toothpaste because one is cheaper this week. You are not loyal. If you were, you'd book direct. Story 26. I actually, for once, have a relevant comment. I worked at Holiday Inn Express for a little bit. Spread a towel out on the counter before putting your stuff on it, because I know some of my coworkers would go from floor to shower to toilet to sink with the same rag. We typically get 10 rags a day to clean. They are color-coded to match the cleaner they're used with, i.e. bathroom is pink, window glass is blue, dusting solution is yellow, and we use 2 or 3 per room. If you have 15 rooms, that means you use the same cleaning rag for 3 bathrooms, and for the guests, that's the best case scenario. I know girls who would do 12 rooms or more with 2 rags, bathroom and not bathroom. Nobody gave a duck. The goal was to remove all traces of the last guest and make it smell nice. It was the most disgusting and demeaning job I've ever had. Story 27. Not really a secret, but I found it interesting from butzing with the waiter on my cruise. If you're eating in the dining room, the kitchen is set up. So for the first 15-ish minutes, the cooks are all turning out various appetizers, salads, and soups. So Chef 1, 2, and 3 are all making shrimp cocktail after shrimp cocktail and throwing it on the line. Chef 4, 5, 6 are making the cargo, etc. Your server takes your order and starts grabbing items off the line. After the 15 minutes are up, the cooks switch the line over to entree production. Same process repeats. The problem is, when you order an appetizer, salad, or soup after your entree, or after the line has swapped over, it messes up the flow and they have a smaller number of cooks available to make any of those out-of-order items. Story 28. I spent 6 years with RCL. When you die, that you go from guest to cargo on our paperwork. 9-10 cruises someone passed. Panama Canal, repositioning cruises, west coast to east coast, are the worst for losing older guests. When we entered the canal, deck chairs on the observation decks become a hot item. We blast "Do not save deck chairs" over the PA system for days before, but nobody listens. It's always the same scenario. Grandma is not hungry, so she volunteers to wait with the family's chairs while the rest of the gang gets breakfast. After breakfast, they stop at a shop or two, lose track of time. Well, it's 40 C in the shade, 100% humidity, and that's before 10 a.m. By the time they get back, Grandma's been cooked in her own juices. Also, we have cameras watching the hot tubs that the bridge and engine control room monitor 24/7. If you decide to bump stuff with your so late at night, there are likely more than 6 or 7 different nationalities watching you. Story 29. Don't work on a cruise ship, but ended up hanging out with several people who do, while drunk the last night of a cruise. If you're looking for somewhere discreet and your room is not available for whatever reason, the laundry rooms don't have cameras and do have locks on doors. Wild crap happens there late at night. Story 30. At IHG hotels, that is Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites, Crown Plaza, etc., if you say you're there for a funeral, death, and you ask for the bereavement rate, it's close to 50% off. We also weren't allowed to mention it exists or give the rate unless directly asked for it by a guest checking in. Something else we hid from guests. Generally, when a guest booked a room from a third-party company, Orbitz, Booking, Expedia, they typically paid more. Our managers had us go out of our way to hide that from guests. Lastly, if a guest came into the hotel that didn't fit their ideal guest, that is, tattoos, tattered clothes, etc., we were instructed to quote a much higher room price, and if they decided to stay, to actually charge them this inflated price. Story 31. A lot all of resorts cruise ships have a hierarchy or maybe caste system of employees. I went to a group interview for a resort that had child summer camp type activities. This was relayed to me by people who had done it before. At the top of the heap were the Americans, Aussies, Kiwis. They had better rooms, better days off, more perks, such as being allowed in guest areas of the resort. Then came Western Europeans who spoke English. All the Western Europeans spoke English. Then Eastern Europeans who spoke English. Then Eastern European. Then anyone who was not white. And the people I interviewed with said, the summer camp type jobs are the best jobs. Kids get dropped off after breakfast and picked up by cocktail hour. The nights are yours, where if you work the desk, you can be stuck there at 3 a.m. Story 32. Former hostel worker. We weren't allowed to book gypsies or even let them in and buy a coffee and chill in the lobby. Apparently they always stole stuff, like 100% of the time, according to my bosses. I let them in once and I got robbed. Story 33. Former pets hotel worker. Here, day camp makes your dog worse. They may be really well behaved when you start coming, but there are some whole dogs there and your dog will pick up bad habits. Eating crap, digging in the water bowl, etc. That being said, your dog is still a dog. Intact males aren't even allowed in day camp for this reason. Story 34. This is ducked up. I used to work in hotels, and as the ops manager one summer, we had a lady and her young daughter check in with us. Daughter may have been 6 or so. They were staying for a month, so we got to know them pretty well. The staff would routinely see the daughter unaccompanied around the property. Separately, the mother would be in the bar getting hammered day and night. We frequently cut her off to limit liability. One day around 10 a.m., the daughter came to the front desk and said she can't wake her mother up and she was sleeping with her eyes open. Story 30V. I have worked at a couple B&B style places. First off, we never changed the comforter, only when it had something on it or we had someone we really wanted to impress. In rooms with 2 beds, if one of them looks like it weren't slept in, we don't bother changing the sheets. We just smooth out the wrinkles. Most nights at the places I've worked, we had no nighttime staff. If something happened throughout the night, there's no one there to assist you. We also never locked the doors at night. Anyone could back up a pickup truck to the door, load it up, and be gone before anyone knew. Story 36. I work at a 4-star 4-diamond resort in the pool restaurant area. If you think that old product gets thrown out, think again. We use FIFO inventory, but that means we literally keep it until it looks/smells nasty or it sells code brown in the pool. We don't shut it down, just get the anomaly out of the water and call it good. Oh, and you can count on all the male and most female employees talking about your either fantastic or atrocious body as soon as you're out of earshot. Worst of all, the escort that occasionally worked the property asks us for leads. Story 37. I worked as a room service attendant in a 3-star hotel. Nothing too crazy, but boy were there some crazy stories. I worked with a woman at front desk who had been doing night shifts for over 30 years. One day I asked her a question similar to yours. What can you not tell me about this place? What are the secrets? What's something that would freak me out? She knew every single room where someone had died. She knew how they died, when, what time of day, everything. She never forgot. She's obviously not allowed to tell customers this information, but boy, it was fascinating. Story 38. Hotel worker. We advertise as our tap water as triple filtered. It's not. Complain politely, and I'll comp you tons of crap. We talk about you when you walk away. Hell, usually we talk about you before you walk up to us. Story 39. Just like airlines, hotels purposefully oversell. The hotel will purposefully sell more rooms than it has, and banks on cancellations no-shows. It's very possible at any given time that you could show up with a reservation and be walked to another property, where the hotel will then pay for your room at another location. Might sound like a sweet deal if you're traveling for leisure, but it's a huge pain in the ass if your company's footing the bill and you've been traveling all day and just want to climb into a bed. Story 40. Ships can dump toilets directly out to the sea when they are far enough from shore. Sometimes they cheat and do it a little closer in, sometimes they do it at port. Don't get in the water down current from a cruise ship. Also, a lot of lines will dump trash at sea, especially if they are going really far from shore or will be on the water a while. Usually this is stinky food waste, but sometimes they just dump the whole lot. Story 41. I like these threads because the service industry people come in and act really condescending and arrogant, like their secrets of food being frozen is actually a secret to anyone. Meanwhile, you email a hotel and hear nothing back for over a week, and they call you the whole Story 42. Was anyone working on the Carnival Triumph that got stranded? My aunt was on there, and she is absolutely evil, so just know everything you went through. Helped karma serve a mean lady. Story 43. Housekeeper. We only change the sheets, not the coverlet or the second blanket, unless it's been stained and we're unable to hide it. At least, those are the procedures for my motel. People who have worked out at sea, what's the creepiest thing that's happened? So, it's actually pretty common. But you'll see ghost vessels boats that are undamaged but have no souls on board. In the middle, and I mean middle of the sea. The reason for these tend to be pretty dull. They are normally private boats, they've had bad weather and snapped their lines and just drifted. Still is creepy when one goes past in the middle of the night hundreds of miles from land. Story 2. Not necessarily at sea, but I worked on a research ship in the Arctic. We were slowly pushing our way through an ice fog. A friend and I were on deck having a smoke, just watching the ice slowly float by when a large seal laying on the ice came into view. It was obviously dead, as the skin had fallen away from its ribs, but otherwise it was perfectly persevered. Just as the seal started to disappear in the fog, a polar bear appeared, crouched as though it was stalking the seal. It was also dead. The fur on its extended front leg had fallen away, exposing the bone, otherwise it was also perfectly persevered. Almost in unison, my friend and I look at each other and said, Story 3, on a drill ship off the coast of Nigeria. One evening, the entire surface of the ocean was covered with jellyfish as far as the eye could see. An hour or two later, they were all gone. Story 4. Down in the Caribbean, there was a 90-foot commercial fishing vessel sitting on top of a hundreds cliff where it had been tossed like a tubby toy during a hurricane. Hurricanes don't duck around. Story 5. The only time I was ever on a ship was actually a cargo ship, and it was for a program for my business class. Basically, you got to shadow several people and see a product's full journey. Like I started at a farm, went to a trucking depot, then a dry goods warehouse, then a cargo yard, then finally a cargo ship to China. Can't get off the ship when it gets there, so that was the end. Then catch a ride back on another cargo ship. Trip was very informative. The creepy thing though was, it's 6 a.m. and the ship blades its horn. We are out somewhere in the Pacific and then slows down over the next 20 minutes. I made my way up to the guy that was doing the program and he's talking to the captain, and the captain is clearly pretty freaked out. This is the absolute middle of nowhere, and there's a tiny coral island with no trees or vegetation, just a duckload of birds, and a cargo container next to a tent. The ship is hardly moving at this point, and the captain calls out over a megaphone to see if anyone is there. After a minute, a guy who's clean-shaven but wearing clothes worn to Rags Island, a deep, deep tan, wobbles out of the cargo container. Captain yells out if the guy needs help. He says something, but they can't hear it. A guy volunteered to go out to him on an inflatable boat. He climbs down the rope, gets on the boat. Meanwhile, the guy's just sitting on a bucket. He goes all the way over within 20 the guy. They talk for a few minutes and he comes back, climbs the ladder, and goes to the captain. Captain asks what the guy said. Guy goes, he said he's good. Guy gave no info. No plans, had no food but dried fish and some water distilling thing, is out hundreds of miles from another living person, has no boat, and says, I'm good. Story 6. Maybe it's just me, but on still clear nights the stars are above you in the sky, then they are reflected beneath you in the water, and you lose the horizon, and you are floating in space. You can lose yourself in that place. Story 7. 1. Unbeknownst to anyone on board, Mafia welding a box full of substances on the vessel's hull underwater in the Caribbean only for their friends in Northern America to retrieve them. Similar incidents have led to underwater inspections by Coast Guard divers on vessel arrivals from specific ports, too. A crew member to call the bridge frantically to inform me that the sofa in the smoke room is possessed by a spirit. On closer look, a stowaway had lifted the cushions in Dracula-esque manner, only to try and come out at night, once we were underway in international waters. 3. Wire rope snap during mooring operations, to then basically split a crew member into bits whom we had to then collect in bags. Traumatic to say the least. These things never leave you. 4. A crew member repeatedly removes the safety guard on a grinding disc for convenience, then for the disc to crack and impinge a shrapnel into his left eye. Agonizing screams even for days, till we could reach the nearest helicopter rescue area in the Pacific. 5. Orinoco River, Venezuelan Amazon. Interaction with indigenous tribes where we exchange shoes, basic meds, mosquito repellent, detergent for some wild honey, fish, wild fruit, which I had never seen before. Story 8. You'll expect otherwise, but I've seen more people drown that I would consider reasonable. It's always the same cycle. People get overconfident and don't bother wearing protection, PPE. Then, one day, someone slips and falls to the water. Survival depends on the weather. Port reacts like a beehive. Suddenly, everyone is hyper-aware of PPE, but 1 month later, everyone has forgotten, and no one wants to bother with the tedious process of properly fitting a life jacket. Until someone falls again later and we repeat the loop. Story 9. Does fishing count as working? My dad and I were fishing and thought we saw a sea turtle with its head sticking out of the water. My dad told me to get our camera out, back in the 90s, and I was ready to take the shot. As we got in range, we realized it was a body floating belly up, arms straight up in the air. Poor guy was fishing a few days before with friends when a storm blew and capsized his boat, in the Long Island Sound, anchor off the back next to engine with waves hitting the front, flipped it, didn't get his life jacket on in time. His 3 friends made it to shore. He did not. We drove back to the marina. Radio wasn't working that day, and reported it. A few other boats had also reported, and they were in the process of recovering the body. Story 10. We used to have to sound the fuel tanks on the Coast Guard cutter I was on. That involved going out to the decks and inserting a tape measure into tanks. If we did it at night with a flashlight, sometimes a flying fish, which were attracted to light, would jump out and smack us in the face. That was jarring. Story 11 was traveling through Bab al-Mandeb. The sun had set about an hour before, when all of a sudden, we picked up 4 speedboats pacing us on radar with no running lights, and there was no moon, so it was dark. We top out at 20 knots. They sped to us at around 35-45 and came within 60 milliliters before leaving us be. The atmosphere on board completely changed. The old man got called to the bridge, and we were getting ready to call it in when they turned away and let us be. I was aboard the Maersk Carolina, which is a sister ship to the Maersk Alabama, and on the same route, which got taken a year or 2 later. We had no armed security on board. Story 12. Out of sight of land, when the water suddenly went glass smooth as the sun was setting, and a crew member got floor psychosis and was fighting to step off the back swim deck onto the floor, i.e. the surface of the ocean, he was convinced was actually land. He had to be handcuffed to a bunk and force-fed Valium, and we turned back to drop him off to the nearest port while he screamed about how the boat wasn't real. If he had bolted even a few seconds earlier, he would have likely passed. Story 13, prior Navy here, saw a few intense things during that time, but this was afterwards doing a security job. Navy stuff is mostly just injuries and stuff like that. I'll start by saying I'm not a superstitious person, not religious, don't believe aliens are here on Earth or anything like that. I'm a game designer, an engineering master's degree student. I believe in what can be proven through science, but maybe believe science hasn't explained everything yet. Empirically, it hasn't explained everything yet. But I have no worldly explanation for this story. The post was basically a fire watch. Stay up all night and do rounds to make sure the ship doesn't sink or catch fire. Ship was in port for a major overhaul. They had completely ripped out the wiring and the old all-hands PA system for modernization. The old one was your typical megaphone-looking loudspeakers mounted to bulkheads throughout the ship. The loudspeakers themselves were still attached to the walls, but the wiring was literally cut and the system itself was completely gone. Around 3 a.m. one night, I heard the all-hands whistle. Imagine your typical bosun whistle. And then some mumbling like someone was trying to talk through the speakers. I was a little confused because I could clearly see the cut wires, and I knew I was alone on the ship. But I chalked it up to possibly interference in the magnetic speakers picking up radio waves or something like that. On my next rounds, I discovered a shipyard worker had left a soldering iron on, and it had practically melted a hole in the deck. Not a fire, but a bright red spot and some smoking. I called it in, and it was handled by the shipyard damage control people. In the morning when the crew arrived, I was discussing it with a member of the crew assigned to be the OOD for the day. When he asked if anything else had happened overnight, I casually brought up the weird experience with the loudspeaker incident as a joke. He responded completely deadpan that it was the former XO of the ship who apparently dropped dead at the intercom station. He said they'd experienced it a few times before, and it always preceded some kind of incident that could have gotten a crew member injured or endangered the ship. I wasn't sure if he was messing with me or if this was just typical sailor superstition that I've experienced before. So I was just polite about it and acted surprised and impressed. Fast forward a few shifts later, and I get the whistle and weird crackling again. So out of pure paranoia, I decide to start my next rounds early. Sure enough, the seawater coolant system in the engine room is leaking into the compartment. Not a large leak, but if left unchecked, who knows what damage could have been done. About a year later, I ran into that same officer, and he told me the captain had requested the old loudspeakers be left up even though they were disconnected. He said he'd left the crew shortly after those incidents, so he wasn't aware of any new cases. I've never had anything like this happen before or since, but I still think about it all the time. I keep telling myself, there's a logical explanation, and it's just a weird coincidence. But I can't shake the eerie feeling from it all. Story 14. We had crocodiles and sharks circling our boat at the same time while we were processing the fish and throwing the guts overboard. That wasn't necessarily creepy, but was definitely exhilarating. Captain said he's seen the crocs wait between the dinghy and the main boat to snap you when you hop onto the dinghy. Tropical seas are a whole different beast. Everything in that water is dangerous in some way. Was in northern Australian coastal waters since several people asked. Story 15. Rogue waves freak me out quite a bit. Never got to see them, worked in engineering. But I remember we got slapped by one beam 2 at like 3 a.m. and it almost threw me out of my rack, knocked a bunch of crap off that wasn't strapped down, almost broke our TV, and then it went right back to being pretty calm out. Everyone in my room woke up, nobody got hurt, but we all just stared at each other like, WTF did that just happen? Story 16. Stepdad built and chartered 40-foot boats to go fishing in the shallow ocean and deep sea fishing. Past the continental drop-off, where now you fish mahi-mahi and king mackerel and stuff. Group books a trip. Group is remembering a deceased friend who wants his ashes spread in the deep sea. They leave the docks. Once land disappeared, a small black cloud formed above their boat. It got bigger and bigger, darker and louder, but it only stayed above their boat. Blue skies around, but above their boat was a very dark and pissed-off cloud. The cloud follows them, thundering, making equipment go haywire. 20 years ago, for what it's worth. My stepdad said, "We are here, throw this angry mother over." They spread his ashes. He said, the minute they spread his ashes, the thundering stopped, and within 5 minutes, the sky was perfectly clear. He is not one to believe in spooky stuff, but he said, I had no explanation other than that son of a Karen was pissed off about being dead. Story 17. Not me, but a guy I worked with. He was dive harvesting in an area where a boat had gone down recently. People were lost. As he moved along the bottom, he saw ahead what looked like the shape of a man in oil-slick rain gear. Reluctantly, he moved ahead. As he got closer, he saw the bib pants, boots, and jacket laid out on the ocean floor as if a man was just lying there, preparing himself for the worst. He came within touching distance, and they were empty. Story 18. I spent a summer on a fish processing vessel about 2/3 of the way out on the Aleutian Island chain in Alaska. We were buying fish from a large tender, and some of the older hands on my processor boat were grumbling. I asked why, and they told me a story. Turns out the year before, there'd been a fire on the boat I was serving on, and this fire occurred while they were tied up to the same tender we were buying fish from right now. When the guys on the tender saw smoke coming up from our boat, they took axes and cut the lines instead of getting our guys onto their boat. A fire at sea is one of the worst things imaginable. Those us cut our boat loose without rescuing any of the crew. A year later, my bosses were still doing business with them. If I was in charge, I would have told them to go screw. Nobody on my processor boat was hurt, but it could have gone the other way very easily, and the guys on the tender would have just watched it happen. Oh, probably would have called into the Coast Guard, but otherwise, best of luck. It speaks to the intense greed of the commercial fishing industry. Story 19. My father was in the Navy in the late 70s. His carrier was traveling through the Bermuda Triangle, heading for the Mediterranean. He was on the flight deck one night when all power on the ship suddenly died. Even people's watches stopped working, apparently. About this time, he and other sailors noticed 2 lights in the distance, unmoving, and about 100 feet above the water. The lights were visible for several minutes before they disappeared. My father didn't see them disappear, but others swore they saw the lights quickly descend into the water. In any case, after the lights disappeared, the power returned to the ship. My father doesn't believe in UFOs. Stories about the Bermuda Triangle or anything else supernatural, well, he does wish that Bigfoot was real, but to this day, he has no explanation for what happened. All he knows is that in those few minutes, he experienced a strange sense of accepted dread that he's never felt before or since. There was a time where I thought he was just bullcrafting us kids, even though he isn't that kind of guy. But when I was a teen, he had a mini reunion with some of his old Navy buddies, and they talked about it, even getting into a debate about whether it was aliens or some sort of secret military tech being tested. Story 20. This wasn't even out at sea. It was on a small coastal town about 30 miles north of Boston. There's a point off the main beach of this town that features a curved line of rocks extending into the ocean. It's sort of a quarter-moon crescent-shaped formation that doesn't extend into the water more than 25, maybe 30 feet at the most. However, there's an underwater cliff, and the depth of the water, at the furthest point out, is deep enough that you can't get to the bottom with specialized scuba gear, as in regular scuba diving equipment isn't enough. Something to keep in mind, if it isn't low tide, you can't get to this point without getting your legs wet, about up to your knees. So, a handful of us are out there on the furthest point. It's a popular spot for locals to saltwater fish. I just watching the fishermen and doing nothing but enjoying the experience when I hear a fisherman give a soft but defeated "oh." It's difficult to describe because "oh" isn't typically associated with a terrified reaction, but you could hear the absolute overwhelming duress in his voice. Like it was quiet because he couldn't catch his breath well enough to say more or say it louder. I turned to look, and there was this sea creature that was bigger than a bus, with fierce Jurassic Park-esque spots that were so close together they looked like stripes on first look. This thing was about 3 feet from the rock and riding right on top of the water. The most terrifying part was its mouth. It was big enough to swallow a sedan whole, and its teeth. They didn't even seem like real teeth. They were like a sci-fi horror uni teeth in which the top and bottom were connected along the sides of its gargantuan mouth. I fully understood the first fisherman to spot it being unable to give more than an almost delicate "oh," as this didn't look like anything I'd ever even heard of before. This was monster from outer space. But this wasn't a movie, it was right there in the water in front of me. I half expected someone to pop out of the back of the thing and scream, April Fool, as it didn't seem possible such a creature really existed. Turns out, it was baskin shark. Giant and fierce-looking, but it's a plankton-eating gentle giant. I'd heard the name before, but never so much as seen a picture of a baskin, and I guess neither did most of the other people there. For a few moments, we all stood there terrified, wondering what in the name of alien versus predator was going to happen to us. Finally, one of the older fishermen on the rock informed us what it was and assured us we were in no danger. I believed him, but was still trembling for the rest of the night. Story 21. Instead, I get big ducking waves, icebergs that are way too close, and some 100-foot tall thing looks at me. Good thing I wore the brown pants. I was on a cruise with my family, wife, 2 kids in middle school, a few years ago. Departed from Seattle, it did the Inside Passage. Early June, beautiful weather the whole time. Clear skies, a little choppy around Vancouver Island, but that's pretty normal. On the last night, going back around Vancouver Island and into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, we start seeing just a crazy amount of lightning over the island. Dark clouds, very ominous. I checked the mail channel and then the weather channel, and we're going right into it. You'll get to it an hour or so after dark. I'll preface this bit by saying that I thought I'd seen rough seas before. I grew up on and around boats since I can remember. Parents were military, so we moved around, but I spent my teen years on the east coast of the US. I've been through a tropical storm in the Keys, mainly because my dad's the type to not trust weather reports, i.e. a little dumb, in a $20 knockoff Boston whaler. Spent a ton of time in the Chesapeake Bay, crabbing and fishing for flounder and stripers and such. Seen seas in the 15-25 pound range, so I thought I'd seen some rough conditions. I was incorrect. It got dark as duck as soon as the sun went down. We had a balcony room, because I am A, a fancy Karen, and B, horrified at the thought of getting stuck in an interior room in a COVID lockdown. My wife did the sensible thing and went to sleep, but I just sat down on the balcony all night staring out into the dark. For the first hour or so, they had floodlights on the side of boat, and I could see the water below for a couple hundred feet around the boat. I saw a couple of smallish chunks of ice floating near us, the bright blue stuff around the size of a school bus. When they shut the lights off, I kind of figured that meant there was more of them in the area. Don't worry though, I got plenty of chances to see big ducking chunks of ice around the boat, because we were getting 5 and 10 lightning strikes a minute. Kind of funny because we had, I swear to ducking God, already hit an iceberg that week. The whole family took the excursion on a smaller boat out to the Dawes Glacier, hit it full speed on the way back. Pretty hard too. The crew spent like 20 minutes down in the engine room, and they certainly looked concerned the rest of the way back to the boat. Kids were a little worried, but I told them there's nothing to be worried about until the crew starts passing out life preservers. Me? I thought it was neat. Super good 2 truths and a lie material. I'm on the 10th, 11th, I don't know, something with 2 digits. Floor of the damn cruise ship, and I'm seeing water hitting the balcony glass. I'm guessing the swells are in 30 plus feet. Found buoy data in the region with a max wave height of 14 meters, which seems ducking crazy. No idea how big the sea actually got, but I really thought the boat was gonna break in 2. In the middle of this, I see this light that's at least as far above the ocean as I am. I'm sober during this whole thing, by the way. It's moving up and down and moving. It's beam around horizontally. It came towards the boat, looked right, ducking at me, and left. No ducking idea what it was. Nobody else I talked to saw it. I'd think that the whole thing was a really ducking vivid hallucination if I didn't take a bunch of pictures, check them, and tell out me it ain't creepy as hell. Things I've ruled out. Lighthouse. We were 40 miles from land, and I'm pretty sure lighthouses aren't into staring contests. The sun. End of June. Sunrise is after 5:00 a.m. Timestamps on the photos are between 3 and 3:15 a.m. The moon, June 28th, 2022, was a new moon. Alien. I refuse to believe that an alien species masters interstellar travel and then uses it to buzz a cruise ship for no reason. Things I haven't ruled out. Helicopter. My current theory is Canadian chopper pilot who likes ducking with people. Vivid hallucination combined with some expert-level gaslighting seems like a long way to go to make me question my perception of reality. It's already tenuous at best. Star Trek Eerie, the Voyager home, aka humans from the future need whales. The 80s were weird as hell. Swamp here. How far from the swamp will the gas go? Inquiring minds want to know. Story 22. Heavy seas during a storm on the flight deck. When you see real waves and feel how insignificant you are in the ocean, makes for a surreal experience. One wrong step and there is literally no rescue. Now imagine you need to be along the side of the ship, pulling up heavy metal fences while the ship is bouncing around like a springboard up and down and side to side all at the same time. Oil-slick tarmac glides like butter, so you better pray you got the right boots on. Not going to lie, I had to tap out momentarily and readjust my nutsack before I went out again. It was definitely an experience, man. It's creepy because after one liftoff, you wait around for the next sortie, and you can feel the ship getting thrown around, crashing reverberations through the flight hangar and residual oil from prior pre-flight maintenance that you are almost always going to walk into. Story 23 was on a large ferry in the middle of a cyclone. Waves were washing over top of the third deck. All crew and passengers were in life jackets just in case. Not that it would have done much good at point if we'd had to abandon ship. Waves ended up breaking some windows and the lower decks got a pretty good soaking. But other than a few SCs and bruises and brown stains, we made it to port. Story 24. My cousin worked on prawn trawlers in the Gulf of Carpentaria off North Queensland for 3 years in the 80s. Really good money, but hard work when they would stay at sea for weeks offloading into a mothership. The last season, they returned to port with one less crew than they left with. The official story was, he was washed overboard in a storm. Took over 10 years before my cousin admitted the bloke was an arsehole that regularly picked fights, but made the mistake of pulling a knife on an old sailor. They tipped him overboard. Captain announced that the work would be a bit harder, but they would get the dead guy's share in the pay. Story 25. I was working in a pearl boat for around 18 months on the Arafura Sea a few years ago, and one of my roles was keeping watch in the wheelhouse. Essentially, you make sure the boat is following the preset path on the navigation, and if it strays, you turn in manually to keep it within the course set. My watch was 4 a.m. About 7 a.m., I noticed a white cube, perhaps 200 on our port side. Hard to say with no point of reference, but it didn't show up on the nav/radar system we had that let you plot to recognize boats. It was also not bobbing up and down with the waves. It was just sat there on the waterline, in the distance. I got a better look at it with the binoculars, and it was so strange seeing this white cube just sat still there on the sea in the distance. It wasn't really hovering above it, but as the waves moved with the ocean every now and again, I could see the bottom of it, which is how I know it was a cube. Again, it's hard to say without a point of reference at sea, but I'm guessing it was the size of a van. I'm purely going off how big things appear in the binoculars. When looking at things, I do know how big they are. The person who was following my shift came to drop me a coffee, and he saw it too, so I know it wasn't just me being tired. Following this, a few years later, I saw when the Tic Tac videos came out from the Pentagon, and some of the fighter pilots said they saw 5 shaped objects floating in the sky. Story 26. I worked on research vessels for about 15 years. This is gonna get lost in the middle of the comments, but that's probably for the best. This isn't some made-up crap about ghosts and ghouls and mysterious lights and sea monsters. On its own, it's not that scary, but the implications are. We were doing a project in the British Virgin Islands. It was subcontracted by the Royal Navy, so I can't tell you what it was. Now, it was about 2 weeks into this 6-week project when we saw something floating on the surface of the water. At first, we thought it was a seal or a shark or dolphin. We had found one a week before, caught in illegal fishing nets. So one of the crew hauled it up. It wasn't marine life, it was a girl. Almost immediately, the captain came over screaming and yelling at us to toss her back. He was ducking terrified. This was a brave man with 30 years spent at sea. He had guided ships through storms, sailed across oceans, even spent 2 days on a lifeboat after his fishing boat sunk. So he wasn't someone to be scared lightly, but this past girl ducking terrified him. We were a small crew, only 8 of us. There was the captain, a handful of older, experienced hands, the chief researcher who was this British guy in his 60s, then me, a female about my age, and then a younger intern. The British guy started to argue, and the captain got in his face, squaring up to him, shouting stuff like, "You do not want to mess with this. You do not want to touch this." We didn't see her. He wasn't angry, he was terrified. Whilst we were arguing, one of the other crew threw back into the ducking water. At this point, Captain calmed down somewhat. He refused to tell us what the duck was going on, but just kept saying, "Trust me, we do not want to get involved with this." Afterwards, me and the intern and the other researcher my age were talking about it. The intern spotted what I didn't. But a few years later, the news about Epstein Island broke, which made me reconsider. What if Epstein Island wasn't the only one? What if there is another out there? And if there is, considering we fished a girl out of the water, it's even worse. Story 27. I worked on a dive boat that took customers out for the weekend. Someone has to pick up the lights after the night dive. I've been alone on the seafloor 100 miles offshore in 100 foot of water with just some flashlights and a 19-cuffed spare tank. It's creepy to hear the stuff that isn't in your light cone. Also, dozens of barracuda in a school when I dove off the sun deck. Dove as in diving board type dive, not scuba. Went about 20 feet below surface surrounded by them. We would also occasionally spearfish for lionfish under the rigs and make ceviche. I had my trap full and 2 on the spear with a nurse shark chasing me back to the boat. I missed that job. I had a regular tank as well, but no buddy, just the spare pony bottle, story 28. My grandfather worked as a Navy cook, and he flat out refused to eat shrimp, crab, and any bottom feeder after working at the sea. He always said that whenever something dies, they're the first to start scavenging. It made me wonder what exactly he saw getting eaten by them that made him so viscerally sickened by the idea of eating any of their kind. Story 29. I was with my grandfather fishing off the coast of Oregon. A whale surfaced under us and lifted the whole 50 boat out of the water. A big black eye was looking right at us. Grandpa reached over and petted it. I about passed out. Story 30. Fall of '01, USS Philippine Sea. We were heading home across the Atlantic, chasing a hurricane. 4 days of 20 pitch and 30 rolls, the whole ship smelled of puke. The bow would go underwater. Not just a big splash, but underwater. If you went to the forward part of the ship, you could go up and down ladder wells in one step, if you timed it right. Because the pitching was so great, the counter-rotating screws would make the back of the ship shake like an earthquake when they got near the surface. Story 31. Not a worker, but when I was younger, my family took a trip to the Florida Gulf. A couple cousins and I went deep sea fishing about 30 miles off the coast. I got horrendously seasick and was bench-ridden the whole time and was taking a nap. When I finally woke up, a storm had started to roll in. I remember looking out at the back of the boat and seeing the sky turning an ominous dark gray, and the water just turned black. The waves were starting to get pretty intense, and the captain was all right, we really need to get back before this gets to a point where we can't. I never liked open water, and that experience just made it all the worse. Story 32. Singing. The most beautiful singing. We would hear it every night while on the boat. This was in the Pacific, hours away from the shore. Apparently, it was dolphins. Story 33. McInerney off the coast of Ecuador somewhere. Our helo was out looking for substances boats, so we are all on the flight deck getting some sun, fishing, or generally not doing anything. Suddenly, the ship's engines stop and everything shuts down. Good thing it was smooth as glass that day. About 20 minutes later, I noticed the help doing the lost comms signaling. It wasn't just the engines that died. It was everything. Story 34. When I was in the Navy, we were just off the coast of Italy at midnight. It was dark night, and you couldn't see any lights from the shore at all, no stars. At some point, we passed a long boat, basically an extended rowboat. It had no superstructure or anything. It had a light on. Ship's captain told us that was a guy fishing, and the light would attract fish or whatever. So yes, whoever it was in a completely exposed boat, about 10 or 12 miles offshore, in a completely dark night. And they had a light on to attract things. Story 35. Out tuna fishing. About 170 miles off the Oregon coast one night, had shut down and was just about to go to bed, noticed an odd glowing orb the size of a football down in the water. Thought it was a bioluminescent jellyfish until it started moving. No swimming motion, just slowly cruising around the boat. Had a 1,000,000 candle power spotlight on board, so brought it out to see what it might be. But when I put the light on it, it fully disappeared. Turned the lights off, and there it was, plain as day. A few more showed up and moved around the boat for about 20 minutes. Never saw a trace of what they were in the light, but my crewman and I were seeing the same thing. They eventually left and we went to bed. My crewman was an old salty dog. Sailed from Vancouver Island to the South Pacific and back single-handed twice. Worked on many tuna boats all over the Pacific. Said he'd never seen anything like it. Story 36. I saw the deep-water horizon on fire the night it happened. I guess I wouldn't call it creepy. Sobering and awesome, original definition, are more accurate descriptions. Just a massive structure, completely covered in flames against a black backdrop. We weren't allowed closer than a mile or so, air sea. I can't imagine what that would have looked and felt like from up close. Story 37. Did not see it, but I'll never forget this comment when this question floats around again, pumping deadheads. I couldn't find it, but there's another comment on one of these posts about someone in a sailboat seeing one. Just missed them while they were tearing along at night. Story 38. I had a humpback whale surface on the side of the race yacht I was delivering up East Coast Australia. I rub along him and it caused 100K in gel coat damage. He blew his blowhole, and I got covered in whale snot. Well, stink water anyway. Story 39. We sailed the Suez. I was working on a cruise ship. The crew was paid more to do pirate watch. We watched the sea with simple night vision stuff all night. This was, say, 10 years ago. The wealthy guests might have paid 1 to 3% more for the cruise, but they expected the entire crew to pass battling pirates so they wouldn't have to get up out of their chair. The mindset was so sick they wanted you to die for them, but they also wanted to witness it, or else they had not gotten value for money. Story 40. My dad was in a small flotilla of minesweepers in WW2 off the coast of Iceland. They were in the middle of a sweep. They passed a downed and floating German aircraft with the pilot frantically waving to them for rescue. They had to sail right past and leave him to his fate because of the very real possibility of U-boats. Fast forward 65 years, and my dad wept on his deathbed about leaving the poor guy to pass in the icy Atlantic waters. Story 41, does this count? On a bitterly cold, windless night near the Arctic Circle, I was part of an ad hoc amphibious ready group with attached destroyers, working with Norwegian and Royal Navy. I was just another lowly jarhead, so I didn't do anything special, nor was I in the know on what was actually happening. There was a part of this training where the navies were supposed to defend against a Norwegian submarine. We were all going slower than normal, dim red lights in lieu of floodlights, and there were helicopters buzzing about. Looking for this super quiet diesel-electric boat was a challenge. And even in the 90s, it seemed we were just sitting ducks. Then I saw it. It wasn't Norwegian. Myself and the other 3-4 of us that had a rotating duty saw it when the sailors pointed to it. It was submerged, but we could still see it. A glowing shape, looking like a ghost, floating by at periscope depth. Either because of phosphorus algae or Cherenkov effect, we swear it was giving off an aura. What type? What was it doing? How close did it get before the higher-ups knew it was there? I have no idea, but the feeling that they had us if they wanted us and we were not taking to them spooked me forever. I have a cold, hard, respect-driven fear of submarines. Story 42. This isn't deep sea or even that creepy, but it is something that other people might experience. About 15 years ago, there was a long heat wave across the whole of Europe, and I was visiting family in Southern Ireland. Since it was so hot, I went swimming on the coast. Weirdly, as I entered and my ears got close to the water's surface, I could hear a constant loud whining, like 100 mosquitoes right beside my ears, but coming from all around. I guess the local conditions meant wave sounds were reflected and interfering or something, but I found it really unnerving and was already thinking about getting out. I kept on swimming though, and had got quite far out, when suddenly I saw in the water directly in front of me a huge bloodshot eye looking up at me. It was at least a meter wide and totally made me jump in the water. It was a massive jellyfish with tentacles maybe 4 millimeter long or more. I turned around to go back to the shore, but saw that there were dozens more enormous jellyfish all around and below me, all with the red bloodshot eye pattern. I had to carefully weave around them to get back. It turned out that the heat wave had forced jellyfish from Spain to migrate north, so not really creepy, and I doubt they were dangerous. But as far as low-level shocks go, it really gave me the chills as it happened. Story 43. One night while at sea, I was doing rounds. It was summertime, so many of the exterior hatches were open. I was doing my usual routine and was headed for the winch room. As I stepped into the space, I happened to look up towards an open door on the upper level. In the doorway, I saw a large humanoid shape. It was made of absolute blackness, like pure black, such that the night beyond the door looked dark gray instead of black. I felt that whatever it was looking directly at me, and it simply felt like pure intelligent malice. It immediately made me go into flight mode. I was close to the stair tower, but this shape immediately next to a door that led into the accommodation. And just a few steps past that door was the stair tower. I ran as fast as I could up the stairs, hoping that I'd pass the next deck before whatever I had seen could intercept me. Once I arrived on the bridge, I found the mate and engineer having a chat. I told them what happened, and myself and the engineer headed down to search. When we arrived at the winch room, he took a look, and so did I. The shadows in the doorway almost looked humanoid, but the blackness was gone. Not sure what I saw, or if I got spooked, but it still sends chills down my spine, retelling that story over and over, decade later. Story 44. I have only had one 2-week stint working at sea. I was assisting a featured chef on a theme cruise. 8 days into this 2-week adventure, I wake up running down a hallway. In my dream, I was chasing someone. I can't recall who or why. I was barefoot in pajamas with no bra, ID, or room card. I was embarrassed of going to the guest services desk to request a new room card. For context, I have been known to talk in my sleep, but I have never sleepwalked before or since. Story 45. U.S. Navy cruiser. While inspecting a compartment called the Pittsword as part of sounding and security. It's a compartment all the way at the bottom of the ship that has water in it to measure ship speed, only accessible through climbing a ladder while straight down 5 stories. Anyways, I had a shipmate swear he had his leg grabbed by something as he was climbing out, and it scared the hell out of him. I figured it was just an old sailor's tale, and he was trying to scare us newbies. Nope. That compartment was haunted as duck. I was in the Pittsword one night and bent over to look at the water level, and something grabbed my ass so hard I almost fell into the water. I was convinced it was a shipmate hiding down there, trying to play the ultimate prank, but after frantically looking under every nook and cranny in that compartment for about 10 minutes, I found nobody. So I'm standing there realizing a horny sailor's ghost just coped a feel in the afterlife. I hated going down there after that. Story 46. I worked on a scallop boat, and someone dredged up a half-decomposed shark. That was the day I learned that a half-decomposed shark's head looks concerningly like a human torso at first glance. The snout had rotted away to resemble a pelvis, and the way the gills were exposed looked completely like a set of ribs from a distance. It was great relieving to see that it wasn't. But on that same trip, I heard some crewmates talking about the boat they knew discovering a human head and being investigated thoroughly after coming to port. Story 47. Response to the Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. The debris fields of people's lives washed out to sea. Roofs of houses, sheds, furniture, picture frames, overturned boats, everyday items, just adrift, knowing that over 15,000 people were washed out to sea. Eerie Story 48. 400-meter container ship doing night rounds in the engine room. Gets awfully eerie. Ships creak and make a lot of weird noises, and when you're alone down there in a big cathedral of machinery, you start seeing and imagining weird things. So one day I'm just finishing up and I'm about to open a door when the wheel suddenly flies around and it bursts open, revealing a ghostly apparition in the passageway which lunges towards me. Anyway, the next day I'm in front of the captain explaining why I punched the third engineer because he had been sleeping in the duty cabin and wandered down to raid the control room fridge wrapped in the bed duvet. Spooky stuff. Story 49. About 75 miles off the coast of Maine on a 55-foot sailboat. No wind at all, just fog so thick we could barely see the bow, and dead silent. Suddenly, there's a disturbance in the water to the side. A giant series of bubbles, and the boat lists and starts sliding into the bubbles. It lasted just a few seconds, but stopped as quickly as it started. We tried convincing ourselves it was just a whale bubble fishing. Didn't really work. Story 50. Not me, but my husband always talks about the time he was a deckhand on a NOAA research boat when he was young and spry. One time while on station in the Antarctic Circle with a cable 1,000s of feet in the water, their boat listed rolled 42 degrees. Fortunately, no one went overboard or was injured. Makes my butthole pucker just thinking about it. Story 51. On a platform in the Persian Gulf in the pitch black night, heard a motor revving hard out in the water, but couldn't see anything, not unshul. There was plenty of fishing boats, but they were white, and you could normally see them with a flashlight. I shone my flashlight out on brightest setting and could see a large black submarine diving as it was approaching straight for us. It was surreal, and I had to give a report to Aramco the next day as it was Saudi waters, and they told me it was most likely an Iranian sub watching us. Story 52. When I flew for the Coast Guard a couple of years ago in the Caribbean, we detected a small open boat on radar. It measured no more than 3 meters in length. We flew towards it and eventually picked it up with our optics. Zooming in, we saw 2 or more very decomposed bodies in the boat. We looked up the faded registration after our return to base and discovered the boat was a local fishing boat registered in Western Africa that had been missing for a few months. It was smack in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Eventually, a cutter was tasked to collect the boat and tow it back, but it was decided to scuttle it. Story 53. Former Navy. Maybe not creepy, but my first ship became known as the murder ship because 5 guys disappeared without a trace over 2 years. By missing sailor number 4, the searching every possible hiding place became perfunctory because we all knew damn well they'd went sploosh in the middle of the North Atlantic at night. Later on a submarine, watching a nearly 3-foot column of water pouring in through an open hatch somewhere off Alaska had a definite puckering effect. Again, not spooky unless you knew the math of how many seconds that could continue before the conditions became, well, inhospitable. Also had a shipmate that liked to walk to the shower with a towel around his shoulders and his junk tied in a loop. Again, not so much spooky as I could have gone my whole life without seeing that. I told the story to my wife and she asked, why would he do that? And as every guy already understands, because he could. Story 54. My dad was fishing in his wee speedboat off Vancouver Island. He decided to travel out over the ocean to try his luck far away from his usual run. He was at it for a few hours when suddenly, in his peripheral vision, he spotted what he thought was an old man bobbing up from behind his boat. He turned abruptly, but the man was gone. He stared around the near ocean surface for a minute, hoping to never see him again, when gurgling up from the depths appeared the biggest gray-faced sea lion he has ever seen. Story 55. The total, complete, absolute darkness that is the sea on a moonless night. It just feels like you're floating in a void, and it's hard to describe the creepiness that comes with not being able to distinguish between sea and sky. If you fall overboard, it's extremely difficult to find you, especially in a big swell. Except for the slapping of the water against the hull, it's also totally silent. Story 56. Besides the odd whale breaching, the horrible realization that there's no 5G or Wi-Fi, the next 4 weeks crossing an ocean is mind-boggling. After a while, you even start talking to your other crew members. Creepy stuff. Nightmare material. Story 57. I work on a deep water drilling rig. We use a remote operated sub for all of our subsea work. We are commonly in 8,000 of water. The things I've seen from the subsea video is wild. Like sea creatures I've never seen before in books. It's crazy to see what lives in water that deep. Story 58. My sister worked on a commercial fishing boat in the Bering Sea. The captain would often get drunk, and one night she could hear the girlfriend screaming as if she was being attacked. My sister was armed and charged in and literally mutinied the captain. They called for the Coast Guard, who took him into custody. My sister still has PTSD from it. With no backup in close quarters, it was really a dangerous situation, but I am proud of her. Story 59. I watched a seal deliberately torture seagulls once. The seal had caught and killed a fish which he used to attract seagulls. Then he grabbed the seagull and held it underwater for an extended period of time before releasing it. It looked like he was having fun. Story 60. Fascinating. I've been reading this for more than half an hour already. Can't get enough. What strikes me too is what extremely good and evocative writers so many of you are. Absolutely brilliant. Makes me feel these need to be collected into several volumes of short stories. I'm an editor, so I appreciate good writing even more than most. Story 61. A drinking buddy of mine has been a commercial fisherman for years. One day I asked him what was the creepiest thing he ever pulled up in his nets. His answer, a woman's hand cut off at the wrist with her wedding set still on her finger. Story 62. Don't see any submariners sharing stories here on my boat. The sonar techs had this entire lore that they could hear ghosts while we were out in the med. I would go into the shack a few times and time to listen for it, but I'm pretty sure they were full of it. Personally, the creepiest thing was having to come up to periscope depth on a moonless night on the optical periscope and just seeing black. No idea where the horizon was. Couldn't see any stars or lights, just blackness. Story 63. Been on many fishing boats in the middle of the Atlantic. No real scary stories, but just seeing nothing but black abyss in every direction is pretty surreal. Story 64. I was in the Navy AE-86 on patrol in the Persian Gulf, and one afternoon the captain got on the 1MC and announced that anyone available should go on the weather deck and take a look. It appears that a transport ship carrying a shipment of lambs experienced some sort of disease in the herd and had to dispose of its load at sea. There must have been 1,000 floating sheep in the ocean. I'll never forget that day. Story 65. Nothing creepy, but absolutely mesmerizingly beautiful. Crystal clear night, no wind, crescent moon, very little light. Stars more numerous to see than comprehension, and a gigantic swath of plankton just below the surface. The best part, the pod of dolphins swimming around the bioluminescent wake. Bioluminescence, star quantity unfathomable, clear night, moon, and star reflection from the ocean, and dolphins swimming alongside me. It felt like I was in a dream. I will remember that one night at sea my entire life. Story 66. Random snippets of chatter on the radio. I was a radio operator on the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, MALU. We shouldn't have heard anyone else but the other ships. I figured the band some Japanese ships were using was close enough to ours that occasionally we'd hear a word or two. It only happened when we were near Japan, and it never bothered anyone else. That's pretty much the creepiest thing I can think of, unless you find looking at the ocean at night with minimal light creepy. Personally, I thought it was pretty. Story 67. Not creepy, but an old retired Navy sailor told me during the Vietnam War there was a soldier they caught abuse. That soldier went overboard, and no one cared or said a thing. The way he told me the story, it was just another day. You could tell this man had seen some crap in his life. Story 68. The isolation. I was on a Noé ship in the Gulf of Mexico that used to be a submarine hunter. There was nothing scarier than looking around at night and seeing nothing but the ocean. No lights, no movements. Everyone else is asleep. Just you and an officer keeping watch. I couldn't do it, and my dad, who had been in the US Navy, was the only family member that understood what I meant. Story 69. Having to rescue crew members in the engine room after a steam pipe burst during cleaning. Seeing your coworker's flesh melt before your very eyes as you desperately try to get them out of there. The scream and the smell. Story 70. I saw a couple offshore oil rigs that were set on fire in a civil war. Holy hell, those things make a lot of fire. From miles and miles away, the heat still hurts your face if you looked at them. And they will burn until someone stops the flow of oil, which can be for generations. Not really creepy, but I was a little horrified at the scale of destruction humans are capable of. It was like looking at a natural disaster, but nothing was natural about it. Story 71. Not my story, but my grandfather was in the US Navy during Vietnam, and his ship was tasked with retrieving Piutzamna out of the water after a ship capsized. The sharks got there first. Story 72. Patrolling the Persian Gulf. At night, you see all the oil rigs doing their burn-off. Those flames just eerily light up the area. It's creepy as hell, especially when the water's calm as glass. Every so often, you see a sea snake skim the surface. The only thought in my head is, I do not want to be here, period. Story 73. Lived near the coast most of my life. Creepiest thing was when I got a chance to go deep sea fishing off of Cape Hatteras. We were near the Gulf Stream and came up on a speedboat tombstoning, meaning it was mostly sunk. but about 6 of the bow was sticking straight out of the water. We got close, but as rule number 1 was, don't go into the water, that was it. And the captain called it in to the Coast Guard. Story 74. Crossed the Atlantic with a group of boats. There was this group sap in which you could report any problems or special stuff. Someone posted that they saw an open boat at around 20 feet just floating around. When they passed it, they saw 3 bodies fully decaying in the boat. We later saw the same boat, but didn't want to come close at all, so didn't see the bodies, but it was supposed to look horrific. Story 75. A waterspout formed 200 yards from the boat. It happens fast, and if you are close and have divers in the water, it'll clench your hole so tight you can't leave your divers, and they probably don't know what they are surfacing to. You are getting an ass kicking, and you can't try to outrun it, cause divers in the water. Also, being at anchor and waking up to one sucks. Story 76. Not me, but my parents. My dad was in the Coast Guard, so he often had to pull bodies out of the water. My mom also came by a body in the water as a kid. She was on a boat or dock, not sure which, with a friend. Story 77. My friend's dad works on an oil rig in the Gulf, and he says besides the death and mayhem from accidents that sometimes watching weather approach, and you're on a rig in the middle of the water is pretty scary. Hurricanes they evacuate, but some dudes need to stay. Screw that. Story 78. Late one night, we had lights chasing us just above the water, maybe a foot off the water, strobing ahead, then behind, then way out ahead for about an hour. Everyone was just watching dumbfounded. Atlantic Ocean. Story 79. As a night watcher, you have rounds and security surveillance camera watch, seeing people go out for a smoke or fresh air and waves swiping them off their feet and taken away. Just vanish, never to be seen again. Water too rough to search for them. Story 80. Watched a few seals floating on their backs, slowly eating fish that they lay on their bellies. Even saw a whale, I think, come up and swallow a seagull in one gulp. It wasn't warm water, so I doubt it was a shark. Story 81. Not me, but my dad was on a ship, and a guy died natural causes. So they put him in the walk-in freezer unbeknownst to my dad. My dad later went in to get something from the freezer. Rigor mortis had set in, and the guy was sitting upright with his arms outstretched. Story 82. Oh, and a guy I was sharing a cabin with didn't get up for work. They eventually realized when he didn't turn up for break and they went looking for him. He was dead in his bunk. Story 83. A friend told me he got a call from a ghost. He was roking at the front desk, cruise line, and he got a call from some woman complaining about noise, but the room was unoccupied. And when security went to check, the room was locked and no one was inside. Story 84. Cousin worked on an oil rig in the Caribbean a few years back. One day, one of his co-workers jumped into the ocean. Dude was jumped in before dawn. They called the Coast Guard but never found the body. Cruise ship crews of Reddit. What's it really like to work and live on a cruise ship? Everyone sleeps with everyone. The food for crew is nearly inedible. You will never find a free washer unless you camp out in the laundry room for a few hours. There are usually about 5 to 15 washers dryers, and anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 crew members. The rooms are tiny, and your shower curtain will always be trying to get to know you biblically. Us citizens aren't paid that well, but some countries, where the conversion rate is really good, make some serious bank. South Africa especially. We do get to get off in port and go have a good time. Many ports have crew discounts for food and drink. However, most contracts last for around 6 to 8 months, so after a while, the same old ports every week start to really wear on you. There's a crew-only bar, and beers are $1.50. Some ships have a crew-only hot tub. That's all off the top of my head. Story 2. You will never be alone. Relationships happen really fast. Your body clock changes. Grudges can fester. Everyone who is higher ranked than you is an idiot. If you have a solo room, then you might as well write a blank booty check. Story 3. Transcribing for a family member who helped fit 3 new cruise ships in Italy and then crewed one for about 9 months. The crew was basically divided in half. There was a huge group of Southeast Asian. Quite a few were even family members. They mostly stuck to themselves and did a lot of the manual labor style work. The second group was 18 to 30-year-olds from US, Canada, Australia, France, and England. The younger kids humped like rabbits and drank like fish. Most people would blow every paycheck going nuts at each port and drinking on the cruise ship. The older Southeast Asians very rarely drank and very rarely did much at port other than pick up some personal supplies. The rooms were pretty small, and the vast majority of them were shared. The meals for the cruise was pretty bomb, and you could also eat/drink anywhere you wanted on the ship, as long as you were off your shift and not in your work clothes. It seemed as if the general consensus was it being a great experience for a short period of time, but it is not something you'd most likely enjoy for more than a few seasons, unless that type of lifestyle appeals to you. Story 4. You have to take a somewhat intense physical before getting on board. This includes a substances test. Random substances tests also happen while on board. Moral of the story? If you want a cruise ship job, Stopped smoking 3 weeks ago. Story 5. Long working hours, very small shared cabin with walls thinner than paper. So you can hear everything your neighbors are doing. Crew food is bloody awful, unless you like living on boiled rice. Crew bar is very cheap, but also full of creepy guys hitting on everyone and insanely gorgeous girls sneering at everyone. But none of that matters. In 5 years on cruise ships, I literally traveled the world. I went to Europe, Canada, North, South, and Central America, including Alaska and Hawaii, Asia, Inc., China, Japan, and India, Africa. I basically visited every continent except Antarctica and went to over 75 countries. I took a sled dog ride in Alaska, whitewater rafting along a river through the jungles of Costa Rica, visited Alcatraz, had an authentic curry in Mumbai, spent a day on a luxury yacht sailing around the Caribbean, snorkeling at the Great Barrier Reef, visited the Great Pyramids in Egypt, been to the lost city of Petra, spent days in Barcelona, Athens, Rome, Kiev, and so much more. None of the bullcrap you have to put up with on board matters compared to that. Story 6, I'm a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all hell is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members having sex, smoking, and drinking. Our beers are $1. No substances or spirits, though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo, yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the happy couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise and the one before that. And the one before that, we are not allowed to duck to passengers. But we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to die. No, I do not know where Jack Rose is. They're not real people. Story 7. I worked on a major cruise line out of a port in Florida. Crew bar has cheap drinks, but you're technically never supposed to be drunk. You can find most crew, they're usually always smoking cigarettes, drinking beers, and getting a little too drunk. Not much else to do when the ship is at sea. Most crew members have families back home, and a lot have girlfriends on board as well. That is just a part of ship life. Crew members are super hardworking, and work weeks are 70 hours a week without a single day off for 6 children 8 months at a time. Most crew members rely on tips for their wages. My position was salaried for $58 a day. I was an officer on board, working in the guest services office. Came out to roughly $1,400 a month after taxes. No one else is taxed besides Americans on board. The best way to describe no days off is waking up to your alarm, and every single day feels like a Monday morning for those that actually have normal work weeks. My position shared a bedroom with bunk beds and really small bathrooms. You could crap, shave your legs, and brush your teeth all at the same time. Depending upon your position on board, determined if you had guest area privileges. I was allowed in guest areas, but after spending all day with the guests, that's the last thing I wanted to do. You're always on duty, and your supervisors have 24-hour access to you at all times by just ringing your phone and waking you up in your cabin. Sleep was very limited, so every off hour was spent trying to catch up. Wi-Fi was $5 a day for 24-hour access to limited social media apps, or $10 for 100 minutes unrestricted. I spent way too much money on the crappy Wi-Fi. Overall, the people you live and work with is what makes your experience on board. Some days are worse than others, but you somehow manage to get through it. Story 8. One of my friends plays in the cruise band. He said he practices like 1-2 hours a day and plays a show, like 4 hours of real work. Then he just drinks at the crew bar and supposedly partakes in group sex. Also, he said there's no such thing as a dry country. You can find somewhere to drink in port, even in strict Islamic countries. Story 9. Most of my friends work for cruises. Since we work in technical theater production, it's an easy hire. Cruises are either a great way to save money or an awful one. Your lodging and food is paid for, and you're getting paid, so that's great. But cruises are boring. Sure, cheap booze and free travel is great for the first little while, but after a while, it becomes like Squidward in that episode where he finds his perfect down. So routine, so boring. Wi-Fi is usually anywhere from $5 a day to $10 an hour, and there is no cell service. So when you're not working, you're trying your best to find anything to do. So a lot of the time you'll start spending money on anything new, and then you're not saving or enjoying yourself. So there's little point. However, many people still enjoy the life of the routine and the travel and figure ways around spending money. Just know it's harder than you expect to be one of those people. But if you can be, it's a great opportunity. Story 10. Worked on a cruise ship for 3 years. Some key points. 1. If you're American, you are a minority. My ship had over 2,100 crew members, and only about 40 of us were American. You are seen as a rare, magical unicorn. 2. Fighting for an open washer or dryer in the laundry room is hell on earth, and whichever buildo put too much detergent in their machine every week causing the laundry room to overflow. You are a soap terrorist, and my soggy sneakers will never forgive you. Food is provided, but the two most common ethnicities on my ship were the Philippines and India, so the crew cafeteria was usually full of food I wasn't used to, like pigtail stew and fish heads. I ate a lot of salad and mashed potatoes on my contracts. 4. Think of a time you did something embarrassing while drunk at a bar. Now, imagine having to see every single person who saw you do that embarrassing drunk thing every day for months and months. That's what ship life is like. It was awesome, though. You travel for free, drink for cheap, and save a lot of money since you aren't really paying for anything unless you want to. I'd suggest it to anyone who has no strings attached and is willing to work hard for 6 to 8 months at a time. Story 11. Your experience as a crew member totally depends on our job and where you come from. I was in entertainment, but as a tech, which to most people makes you like the get child of the ones who actually mean something to people. You get all the benefits of being entertainment. Lido meals at certain times on certain days, guest privileges giving you access to the nightclub, any ship bar ECTs, and as long as you aren't taking away from the paying guest's experience. Cabins are small, and for me, I shared with one person. Money was pretty good given that I lived with my parents at home, so I didn't pay rent and only had to worry about my car payment and student loans. I was able to save money and blow close to $300 every couple weeks on food, cigarettes, booze, and coffee. We had our own crew bar, where drinks were $1 a piece. The job itself sucked. Being a tech on a ship is crap. You work 7 days a week running shows every night, and when you aren't doing shows, you're on call or supposed to be fixing things. I handled sound, so every microphone or speaker on that ship was my gig, and there are a lot of them. The office takes forever to send replacement crap, so you have a million half-finished projects that you pass on to the next tech because you've given up 4 months in. But you hold on, knowing you will be wasted before the night is over, and most everybody is miserable too. The people you work with are incredible. So many awesome people from every corner of the earth, and the better you treat them, the better they treat you. Tipping is not common in a lot of countries outside the US. I tipped on every drink. So instead of 1.25 a beer, my beers were always like 2.25, which is still good, given my situation. Bartenders would give me free drinks and snacks. It was awesome. External hard drives with lots of media, adult films, were like currency. There are essentially 3 castes on my ship: crew, staff, and officers. Crew are treated the worst. 4 people to a room, shared bathrooms, very low on the ship. Staff, which was me, casino, childcare, entertainment, ECT, and officers are officers or zebras, to us common folk. So I had my own cabin steward who made my bed and cleaned my cabin, who I tipped well every payday and who I made deal with via my hard drive to get nicer stuff in my room. I was able to get guest pillows and blankets and better towels. One of my coworkers was Indian and was friend with the Indians who ran the kitchen, so I could get guest room service in the middle of the night if I had the right things to trade, which was usually just media, sometimes a couple rounds at the bar the next night. Story 12. So here are snippets of my experience based on a 1 stint back in 2011. The ships are very rank-based. You are either crew, staff, or officers, petty to senior, and this dictates what types of rooms you are in, with how many people, where you eat, and what privileges you are privy to. You are in very close proximity to anywhere from 1,000 to 500 crew members, depending on ship size. And these people become your friends, family, lovers, and enemies. There is no such thing as division, and there is no such thing as private time, unless you are one of the few lucky ones who have a private cabin. The food you are served is edible, but not in any way enjoyable. You have access to food for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then usually a midnight buffet in the crew mess. You better hope you like rice, because there is a ton of it at every meal. You sleep with everyone, regardless of what they do. This is the one aspect where rank doesn't hold as much power, though the Italian officers will always try their best to put themselves first in line for any new attractive female members. Any vice that you have, whether it be drinking, smoking, having sex, you will do more of it. Alcohol is super cheap in the crew bar, and there really is no such thing as being cut off as long as you don't get caught in a guest area being very drunk. Cigarettes can be purchased duty-free and at really reasonable prices, meaning that you can smoke as much as you really want. And most people are lonely and craving human interaction, making for the perfect opportunity to sleep with just about whomever you want. Your hours of work depend on your position. Singers tend to have the least time-consuming position, with housekeeping and F&B tending to have the most time-consuming. I was part of the entertainment department, and I usually had between 90 to 110 hours per week of work. You are allowed to leave the ship in port if you are not working and if you are not on duty. There are a certain number of crew members, every cruise, that are required to remain on the ship due to safety regulation. And while the first few times you'll want to go out and explore where you are, once you get over that excitement, you really just want to find real food and free Wi-Fi to contact your friends and family. You will learn a ton about other cultures, pick up phrases in other languages, and really respect the lives that people have left behind to be there. Most of the guests think they are far wittier and funnier than they actually are. They will inundate you with questions that make you wonder what time they chose to turn off all common sense. Some of my favorites being, do these stairs go up? Will this elevator take me to the front of the ship? Do they accept us dollars in Alaska? And does the staff live on the ship? At the end of the day, you will meet some amazing people. The crew primarily, though there are some guests who are genuinely good people as well. See some amazing places and be humbled by the work ethic of others and just how much you are capable of enduring yourself. Happy to answer any questions anyone may have, but obviously can only speak to my own personal experience. Hope it helps. Story 13. I'm a deckhand stewardess on a private yacht, if anyone would be interested in that. Very different from cruise jobs, although I do have friends in that business as well. There's drama, but most of the time, people do actually know how to do their job. My first month in the industry was literally networking. Once I had all my certifications, going to parties, events, adding people on Facebook, and following groups to see when a job was posted. I would send probably a minimum at 10 emails a day looking for work. Despite working for billionaires, it is not glamorous. You scrub toilets and walls and sinks with a toothpick and Q-tip, and God forbid you miss a spot. Some yacht owners go absolutely mental if the ship isn't at perfection all the time. I'm lucky and get to do deck work too, which is a lot of scrubbing the outside, maintaining the engine room, and getting to play with the water toys. Some boats have jet skis, water hoverboards, surfboards, etc. All depends on the size of the boat and how much the owners are willing to spend for those items. The partying is nuts in the industry. Yacht crew typically stay at a crew house when they're on shore, sometimes 2 to 4 to a room. Some houses have pools and good amenities. Some are kind of run down and dirty. Substances are huge in this industry. Once cleaned a crew house after an entire ship's crew had lived there and found coke in the air vents. All in all, there are so many different boats to work for that you'll end up finding the right fit and figuring out pretty quick if it's what you really want. I love it, but you also need to be good at filling your time. I've taken up crochet and decided to make that a business in addition to yachting. There's always something to keep you from going crazy on these yachts.